The movie starts with a young rich couple boarding a private jet with a couple of friends. They are flying to Greece where they would sail on a private cruise to Italy. Here is a montage scene about their rich upper-class lifestyles. They have seafood, wine, and they're smoking expensive cigars. The plane lands in Greece, and cars await to take them to the cruise. Amber is the female protagonist. She is a young, beautiful woman who is utterly miserable to the core. The tacky-looking cruise is not to her liking at all. She only agreed to this holiday if the ship had a fully equipped gym. They meet the captain, who's an old, jovial man. But Amber refuses to shake his hand. She snootily remarks that she's not interested in shaking hands with Blackbeard. Gio shows her the room the couple would be staying in. It is a nice cabin, but Amber just turns up her nose. She ignores Gio's attempts to be cordial and asks him to show her the gym. He instead brings her an exercise bike. Amber is not pleased. She is used to having her own way, and Gio has the nerve to soothe her feelings by handing her a jumping rope. Later that night, Amber and her friends are having dinner, whilst they carry out a most moronic conversation of what one would do if they are stranded on a deserted island. Thankfully, they are interrupted by Amber's husband, Anthony, who arrives wearing a Caribbean-style t-shirt. Amber ridicules his look and calls him Popeye. Her degrading comments make everyone uncomfortable around her. They just want to enjoy a god-honest vacation. In the kitchen, the crew members talk about her condescending manners. Gio remarks he was only entertaining their whims because the captain asked him to. The captain tells him that happiness comes at a price, reminding Gio that he's just a poor fisherman who doesn't have much say in this matter. The next morning, the friends are taking a nice swim in the ocean. Amber refuses to step off the boat. She finds the water impure, and when Gio urges her to dive in, she snaps at him and says that he can go swim with the fishes himself. On the boat, Gio hears her talking about how capitalism works for the society's best interests. She thinks that the poor should just work harder if they are in need of an expensive product that is within their rights, and the one selling the product can name whatever price he wants without any moral or ethical guilt. Gio walks up to the captain and tells him he thinks she is a heartless lizard who should be turned into a belt, bag, and boots. As if on cue, Amber whistles to him as if he's a dog, and orders him to bring her water and a towel. She insultingly chooses to call him PP instead of Pepe, and he cannot say anything in return. Later, Amber and her friends are sunbathing, and Gio catches two sailors eyeing them secretly. He angrily flaps them off, but when Amber turns around, she finds him staring at her bug-eyed. That day, when Gio brings coffee, she tells him to reheat the coffee pot, but not before commenting on how the crew members are slacking. Gio leaves but gives her a look of pure loathing. He bursts into the kitchen and tells the captain that he feels like he's being stalked by her. Later that night, the friends play a game of poker and Gio is asked about his opinion on fertilizers and pesticides. He sagely replies that while the use of these man-made products makes life easier, easier does not mean better. These products are expensive, and if you choose to pay for them later, the high interest on it makes it very difficult for a poor man to pay. His opinions fascinate the men around him while the women tut mockingly. Amber just rolls her eyes and commands him to clean out their ashtrays. At lunch the next day, she spits out her lunch and tells Gio that the fish he's served has gone bad. Gio falls into a fantasy where he dumps the food on her head and throws her overboard. He wishes he could also go around saying and doing what he likes without facing consequences. However, reality comes crashing back in at the sound of her snapping fingers. In the kitchen, he angrily complains about her sanity. The crew members taste her dish but find no flaw in it. The captain still orders the cook to remake it. Gio is confused why they had to entertain her whims, and the captain reminds him that the rich folk can do whatever they want, and their job was to idiotically smile back. Later that day, the captain is helping the rich friends climb back on board, and Amber declares that she's discovered better fish at the fish market and tells him to get it for her. The captain informs her that Gio catches their fish for them fresh from the sea, but she snaps at him, saying she doesn't care about his stupid fish. At lunch, the captain serves fish he bought from the fish market, and Amber is deliriously happy to prove that the fish now served was a quality one. Her friends at the table never seem to want to go against her word and praise her efforts. In the corridor outside, a drunk Amber bumps into Gio, who's carrying a big fish into the kitchen. She keeps blocking his way and asks why he doesn't want to dance with her. He curtly dismisses her and tells her he does not care about dancing with people he does not like. It seems that Amber never wants to leave any opportunity where she can degrade or humiliate Gio. The next morning, she tells him he has the mind of a child for wearing a shirt with a cartoon figure on it. Her hatred towards him is so obvious that even her friends get awkward at her obnoxious comments. However, weirdly enough, Gio is attracted to her. At night, when the men go to sleep and leave their wives to drink wine and play poker, he admires her from a distance, watching her as she leans over the balcony looking out at the ocean. When she catches him looking at her, she haughtily turns away, leaving him starstruck. The same thing happens the next morning. Something about her charms him, and he cannot take his eyes off her alluring figure as she walks down the deck. Eventually, the men take off on a boat to explore caves somewhere in the distance, and Amber asks Gio to lower the boat for her as well. He cautions her about the approaching current, but she insists. As they sail off in the boat, she consistently taunts him. But suddenly the engine breaks down and they are stranded in the middle of the ocean. On the boat, Gio finds his voice and tells her off for calling him insulting nicknames. They wait for others, but the current pushes them off course. Hours and hours later, the situation turns more and more hopeless. Night falls, and she has to resort to using his sweater to keep herself warm. The next morning, she wakes up to find that there is no Gio on the boat and panics. However, Gio resurfaces with a screwdriver in his mouth. Amber wants to take control of the situation and looks around the boat, only to find a flare gun which Gio makes her put away before she hurts them both. He tries his best to accommodate to the situation and even manages to catch a fish, but Amber is disgusted and throws it off board. Gio is angry at her for throwing their only sustenance, but before he can say more, Amber spots the crews close by. They start fighting over the flare gun, and in their struggle, Amber releases the trigger on the inflatable boat itself. The boat is now useless and they have to unwillingly spend the night surviving a terrible storm effect. The next morning, Amber spots land and she wakes up a sleepy Gio. They both somehow make it by paddling with their arms. On the shore, Amber is desperate to reach civilization and Gio goes off to scour the beach. Turns out that they had landed on a deserted island instead, and there were no others to help them. Now they both had to survive with each other. Amber refuses to grasp the gravity of the situation and keeps insulting Gio's intelligence. She tells him that where there is life, there are people. Not only that, she tells him to stop arguing with her and calls him offensive names, saying that she doesn't want to reason with him. At this point, Gio is really losing his cool. He hates her sharp, insulting manners and tells her that he won't stand for it. She may be the wife of a baron, but right now, she was as helpless and desperate as he was. He leaves her and goes off on his own way, while she yells insults to his back. It soon becomes apparent that Gio has more control of the situation than she does. While Amber wanders around aimlessly in the blazing sun, Gio is already gathering the essentials he would need to survive. He drags the remains of the boat, finds a long staff, and even discovers a small abandoned hut on the island. He captures pure running water in a glass bottle that he found at the shore, while Amber cannot find any way to quench her thirst. Meanwhile, Gio has got his hands on a rubber tire that he strips down to make a makeshift bow. It is after some time that Amber finds him and steals his bottle. She looks smugly at him, but his only reply is to show her the fish and the lobster he caught, and that makes her go speechless. Later, as they both sit some distance apart, she tells him she'll get him arrested. Then she makes an offer to him to sell her his fish. He is flabbergasted. This woman has done nothing but taunt and insult him non-stop, and now she also has the audacity to keep demanding things from him. She offers him $500 and he tells her to bake a cake since she's so hungry. He refuses to listen to her demands, and when she increases the offer to $1,000, he smoothly quotes one of her own laws on capitalism. The proprietor of goods can set any price that he or she sees fit, and the poor must work hard to pay for it. Seething with rage, she calls him a scumbag and lands a sharp blow on his back. This enraged him and he smacks her on the face. With that, he lays his ground rules. She can never insult him again. She is now his slave and he her boss. If she wants food, she'll have to earn it by washing his clothes. And henceforth, she'll have to refer to him as master. Robbed of her authority, she weakly protests that he was taking complete advantage of her. But he coldly replies that he's her boss now and there's nothing she can do. She is forced to go and wash his clothes. When she returns, Gio tells her to thank him for giving her the privilege to wash his clothes. Then he tells her to fetch water for him. Helplessly, she has to obey. At night, he refuses to share the hut with her, and she loses her cool again and insults him, earning another sharp slap to her face. The next morning, he finds her outside sprawled on the ground fast asleep and wakes her up. It is time for her to clean his room. He then takes her to help him catch fish. She is revolted by the task of holding it, but he doesn't care. There is food to catch, and he doesn't need a namby-pamby weakling who can't even take care of a fish. Later, she meekly tells him that he is decent to her and she would reward him. He finds this despicable, and tells her that whatever monetary reward she thinks of giving him was never earned by her. Even a prostitute earns her own bread and butter. He then proceeds to assault her and orders her to kiss his hand. In the next scene, she brings him firewood. However, when she proceeds to sit down, he stops her and tells her he wants to be waited on. He reminds her of the way she treated him on the boat. She'd never respected him and she'd always make outlandish demands to him. He then asks her to dance, and she slowly gets up and starts shuffling her feet in a weak attempt to dance. She starts singing, and he immediately gets captured in this wild fantasy of her dancing and singing in front of him seductively in a golden dress. Later, he watches her as she's washing his clothes. She gets uncomfortable with his staring and he snaps back at her, asking why she didn't have any shame on the boat when she was lying naked sunbathing. Why didn't his staring concern her then? He then starts laughing at her attempts to be bashful and kicks her. Now she's angry and insults him back. He gets up to punish her and she tries to run away, even managing to kick and punch him, but she cannot escape his clutches for long. He then hurries away. A strange catharsis has taken place. They both are confused at what had just taken place and neither can quite understand what the other feels. A subdued Amber walks up to him the next morning, but instead of talking, she just crawls on her knees and starts kissing his feet and limbs. She tries to tell him that she desperately wants him and he seems to understand. The scene moves forward, showing them making love to one another over and over again, for what seems like hours. Later at night, they are lying next to each other on the bed without clothes, and he tells her softly to keep calling him master. She agrees, and the film montage shows them growing closer and closer together as their love for each other grows. She now readily accepts him as her master and eagerly waits for his advice. Even when a cruise ship is seen near the island, she goes against her instinct to call out to it and hides behind the rock. At night, they are both sitting near the fire. Amber feels a bit insecure about herself and asks him whether he would have fallen for her if he had a choice of dating someone younger. When he is puzzled, she explains that 18-year-olds probably have a better chance with men. But he rebukes her sharply for this. He cannot understand why women think this way. In his perception, a man doesn't need a girl but rather a woman. He then calls her tenderly over to him and comforts her. Dark clouds gather above their heads and they move inside the hut. While they are waiting for the rain, Gio discovers alcohol and they both get drunk. Soon, they start playing a mad game of charades, and a crazy montage follows, where we see them have fun playing out movie characters. The next morning, Amber admits to Gio that she's in love with him. He finds it hard to believe her and tells her that if they had not been stranded on this island, she would still be with her millionaire husband, miserable and rich, and he would have still been a happy Italian fisherman. But he admits to her that he liked the picture of them both strolling down Fifth Avenue together, even though it seems impossible to ever happen. Amber just smiles in response. The next morning, she wakes him up to show a live octopus she caught herself, and he is impressed. She has certainly learned a lot from him, and maybe he was exactly what she needed in her life even if she had mistreated him before for being who he was. The movie cuts to a montage, showing how time is going by and Amber and Gio are still madly in love with each other. However, a day comes when Gio spots a cruise near the island. Amber tries her best to stop him from calling out to it, but Gio is still not convinced if she actually loves him. He wants to test her love to see if she'll give up her rich husband to stay with him. She begs and cries. She even tells him she'd stay on the island with him forever, but he is adamant on his decision. In the next scene, she is wrapped in blankets while her friends ask her about her time at the island. A feeling of great sadness comes upon her as she talks about Gio and how he took care of her, and she leaves them alone to look for him. Unfortunately, things don't go so well for the both of them. Gio finds Amber locked in an embrace with her husband, Anthony, but when he approaches them, Amber makes no move towards him and Gio leaves, heartbroken. A man turns up at his doorstep offering him a bag of money for his efforts to keep Amber alive. However, Gio kicks him out. With the money, he buys Amber a beautiful ring. Back at the hotel where Amber and Anthony are staying, Amber receives a call from Gio. He confesses his undying love for her and Amber breaks down. She wants to be with him and promises to do what he wants from her. She asks him to leave a note for her at the reception. However, the call is quickly cut short when she sees her husband standing close by and watching her strangely. Gio faithfully turns up to leave her a note at night, telling her he has a boat ready for the two of them. It will leave at 9 in the morning. The next morning, however, Amber eagerly asks the receptionist if she has received any notes, but before the receptionist can give it to her, her husband turns up behind her and asks, "What is going on?" Amber panics and says she was looking for him. The husband looks at the receptionist and asks if she has any messages for the both of them. She only hands him a note related to the arrival of the helicopter that was soon to come and pick them up. Amber leaves confused and heartbroken, and her husband spots the envelope that Gio has left for her. Later that day, a distraught Amber heads towards the helicopter ready to take her away forever. She thinks that Gio has abandoned her, and she tries to control herself so as to not give away her emotions at the thought of leaving him behind. Her husband, sitting next to her, hands her the note that Gio intended for her and urges her to give it to the baggage handler. Without looking at it, she quietly passes it to the man, who takes it away. The helicopter is now getting ready to take off. The man finds another message on the envelope telling him to hand the note to Gio. When Gio opens it and finds the ring inside, he runs with all his might after the helicopter. However, he is too late, and the helicopter evades him, leaving behind a frantic Gio, waving his arms to get the helicopter to stop. The movie ends with the ring, as it flies away from his grip and lands in the ocean, symbolizing their silent promises that could not be fulfilled.